Welcome to our class. Today, we are going to talk about white pottery and primitive porcelain. Among early Chinese potteries, the white pottery was particularly worthy of notice. It is not only because of the uniquely clean and pure beauty that it possessed. Another very important reason is that its raw material was quite different from most clay and sand potteries at that time. Abundant information shows the white pottery's chemical properties were very close to those of porcelain, clay, and kaolin. There was a minute difference in iron content between porcelain, clay, and kaolin, 1.59% and 1.72% respectively, both much lower than other raw clay used for pottery making. Thus, the white pottery, similar to these two kinds of materials, also gained the white color. White pottery surfaces usually have the polished finish, with only few examples of the stamped rope patterns. The late Song Dynasty was the time of rapid development in the making of white pottery. The works during this time used fine quality body that was white and smooth. On the surfaces are engraved with unique Chinese patterns such as Tao Tie, Kui, Yun, Lei, and more. It is also evident that some white potteries were imitations of bronze vases of the same time period, having similar or identical modeling and adorning motifs. The firing technique for white pottery was the most advanced of all pottery at the time. Compared to other potteries, white pottery was sturdier in material, cleaner, and more elegant in appearance. Thus, it was the favorite among the ruling class. During the Xia, 21st to 17th centuries BC, and Song dynasties, white pottery were mostly Chinese wine containers owned by the ruling class, or vessels for fruits such as the dou and bo. The significance of white pottery lies in its use of porcelain class clay. Although white pottery was not yet true porcelain as kiln technology was still insufficient, but it most certainly paved the way for the creation of primitive porcelain. The ancient Chinese, when making white pottery and hard-stamped pottery, sought constant improvement in body materials and tempering, added with increased metering temperatures and better glazing techniques. The end result was primitive porcelain. Primitive porcelain was made of materials that could be fired until reaching relatively high temperatures, around 1,200 degrees Celsius. There were three basic requisites to producing primitive porcelain. First was the choice of raw material and treatment. Increased aluminum oxide content and lowered iron oxide concentration was needed so that the body can be of a white color. The second requirement was metering temperatures of at least 1,200 degrees Celsius so that the body can be fully congealed and no longer water absorbent. When knocked on, it produced a crisp metallic ring. Third and last requirement was the glaze, which was applied uniformly to the body and also fired at high temperatures. The creation of glaze was certainly an essential condition for making porcelain ware. The glaze on primitive porcelain was perhaps discovered by chance. While firing a piece of pottery inside a tightly sealed kiln with rather high temperatures, some burnt wood ash came into contact with the surface of the pottery and was melted and congealed with the feldspar in the porcelain clay. Thus, a thin layer of natural glaze was formed. This accidental occurrence gave pottery makers an innovative idea. They proceeded to mix firewood ash with diluted porcelain clay and applied the mixture on the surface of unfired clay body. That was how early ash glaze was born. This type of glaze, which contained filed ash and small traces of iron, turned yellow or brown in oxidation fire and blue or blue-green in reduction fire. High-temperature glazing can be considered a great invention of the Chinese people. Albeit accidental, its discovery was even earlier than the first practice of low-temperature glazing, which was invented in West Asia. Usually in basic colors of olive green, green, blue, yellow, and brown, high-temperature glaze, when compared to the exquisite low-temperature glazes in West Asia and Southern Europe, appeared more calm, subtle, elegant, and smoothing. These characteristics later became a unique style of Chinese porcelain. Primitive porcelain wares usually came in vessels such as wine, cups, bowl, urn, jar, dou, and so on. Its body was relatively tough and usually in a grayish-white or grayish-brown color. Very few pieces have bodies of off-white with a slight yellowish tint. Its glaze color was usually blue-green. Some were bean green, dark green, or yellow green. The modeling of primitive porcelain was the same as hard-stamped pottery, which was made through the cold method. After achieving desired shape, stamps engraved with design patterns would be used to slap the surface of the body. On one hand, it strengthens the bond of clay cores. On the other hand, decorative patterns were impressed onto a cast. Finally, the vessel was smoothed, glazed, and fired. Primitive porcelain was rarely placed under the glazed surface. Most were covered with geometric patterns such as leaf rings, sawtooth marks, parallel lines, matte crossings, and S shapes. Some would be circular or rope patterns. The newly introduced primitive porcelain in the Song Dynasty had many great qualities. Its surface had a smooth glaze, which was somewhat resistant to dirt and easy to clean. Aside from the middle to lower reaches of the Yellow River, where small quantities of primitive porcelain was unearthed, most archaeological findings of primitive porcelain were concentrated around the lower reaches of the Yangtze River and southeastern China along the coast. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. See you next time.